Hi, this is Reg ATHWAL, and welcome to our channel for another one of our episodes for Family Business Legacies. We're getting a chance to interview a great guest that I've got today that can help us with their words of wisdom, insights and ideas that can help us at a family level, business level, or ideally both. I have a very, very special guest today, and it's only fair that I give you a formal introduction. Danah Zohar was born in 1944 and educated in the United States, and is a UK citizen and resides in a lovely place called Oxford in the UK. She's the author of the best-selling Quantum Self and the Quantum Society, books which extend the language and principles of quantum physics into a new understanding of human consciousness, psychology, and social organization. In 1997, she published Rewiring the Corporate Brain, using the new science to rethink how we restructure and lead organizations. And in February 2000, she published SQ, Spiritual Intelligence. And in April in 2004, it carries on. She's published over 9 books. And in 2004, Spiritual Capital came out, Wealth Where We Can Live By. And that video is also on our channel. Make sure it pops up at the end of this episode. We did a book video on that book, so make sure you check that out. And a recent book, which is what we're going to focus on today, is The Quantum Leader, a revolution in business thinking and practice, which was published on the 13th of September 2016. I could spend hours talking about her introduction, and everything is in the description below, but she is a sought-out advisor. She's a professor to many universities, not only in China, but also she's a fellow for Cranfield School. She's also with Oxford University, and she's a keynote speaker and lecturer for many leading organizations, including YPO, just to name one of the prestigious organizations, and also the International Federation of Training and Development Organizations. She's worked with governments, including the UK Government Cabinet's Office, Japan Council for Growth of Future Generations, and with the Economic Institute in Russia. I've kept it brief. She's got a lot of experience. We're going to talk about the academia, her personal experiences, all the expertise she's got with her books, and really get an insight into what does the quantum leader mean and how can it impact your business. So on that note, Donna, welcome to our show.
Hello, nice to be with you.
So how did this journey start when it comes to quantum thinking, Donna?
Oh, it started when I was 13 years old. My mother bought a book about the atom for a boy's birthday party. I read it before giving it to the boy, fortunately. Immediately fell in love with the atom. And then when I was 15, I read David Bohm's classic book on quantum theory. And that was it. The rest of my life was marked out because I felt that quantum physics could answer all my big questions of the kind teenagers ask. And I thought even at that young age that it's a new way to think about everything.
Wonderful. So in this new book, you talk about why business and businesses need a revolution. Why is that?
Well, I think with COVID now, even the most recalcitrant leaders realize something different has to happen. The way business has been done traditionally was, first of all, the theory they used, Taylorian business model, was inspired by Newtonian physics, which goes back to the 17th century. And most businesses today are modeled on Taylorian and i.e. Newtonian thought. They were designed to run in times that were simple, law-abiding, predictable, rather slow. The machine was the model for the universe and therefore for the company, according to Taylor's thought. And it was the machine age, so that was very appropriate. The Industrial Revolution thrived with the kind of companies that we still have today.
Yes.
But times have changed. We don't live in a slow, predictable, orderly world anymore. We live at a time of huge complexity, rapid change, massive uncertainty, global interconnectedness, and our world is very fast. Plans made today may be out of date next week.
So can I ask you just to come in, because I've got so many things I want to get into with you with the time that we have. So one of the things you talk about is quantum strategy dynamics, QSD. How does that apply in today's world? Could you give us some ideas on, how does one use QSD to go beyond this old way of thinking, and how it links in with what you call the 3 levels of real transformation?
Well, quantum strategy dynamics is roughly how do you make a strategy today? And as strategic thinking in the past was designed, as I said, for those slower, simpler times, uh, strategic thinking has to change today. For one thing, we know now that people aren't just heads. They're also their feelings, they're their motivations, they're their values, they're their purposes. And business leaders have got to think about this. They've
Right.
got to think about their employees not as passive units of production who are just instruments of the company, but as people who can think, who can be creative, who, if unchained from control from the top and allowed to think and do things in the company, have a great deal to contribute. And QSD is designed to be a strategic thinking that takes all that into account.
Yeah, because you talk about, and we featured this in Spiritual Capital, where you've got people who think logically, sort of left brain type people. Then you've got people who do things with their heart, maybe more emotionally driven. And you take that to the next stage where, whether it's strategy or motivation or other areas of business, you feel that there's that third part that we don't really tap into. Probably 90%, if not more, don't tap into this spiritual part, or third dimension of transformation. Could you touch on that for a second and give us an example maybe of, from your experiences of case studies of how that has been applied?
It's the spiritual dimension, which that word frightens many business people, so we'll put it in brackets. By the spiritual dimension, I mean the realm of meaning, purpose, vision, values, the things that really deeply motivate us in life. Many, many studies have shown that simply making money doesn't make people happy. Simply having a healthy bottom line today does not make a company sustainable. Many of the Fortune 500 companies go out of business within 5 years. The whole strategy of the old way of thinking is about quick short-term results, a healthy quarterly bottom line, suck the customer for all you can right now, let's maximize our profits, and neglect everything else. The company is an island unto itself. It has no responsibilities to anyone but its shareholders. It has no particular responsibilities to its own employees, to its community, to the planet, etc. All that thinking has got to change, because we know now that we live in a completely integrated, entangled world where everything is connected to everything. Companies are very much part of the world, part of the community. The way a company runs affects the lives of everyone, not just its own employees, but its customers, the community in which it's located.
And do you think that's why? Do you think that's why then that family businesses are probably different to traditional corporates, where a lot of family business, because they're thinking about their legacy, they're thinking about passing on that legacy to the next generation. So the way that they see their business is different to a traditional corporate.
Yes, family businesses have always been different. I mean, one family business that's still very much in keeping today is Marks and Spencer PLC. You probably have a branch of it in Dubai. It's all over the world, and that's traditionally been a family business. And M&S leaves with values and vision and trying to keep up with what the customer really wants, having an interactive dialogue with its customers. So yes, family businesses have traditionally been different. They do care about the future because they want to leave something to the next generation. They also tend to be more value oriented because the family itself cares about something. It's the big corporations that are the real guilty parties in all this, where it's all disengaged from values and meaning, and the sole purpose is that healthy quarterly bottom line today, right now.
Well, we've seen it recently, haven't we? If you think about whoever's watching this right now in 2020 during COVID-19 and the pandemic and US elections around the corner, it's interesting, isn't it? When you hear the current president, for example, in the US and about doing a good job, everything's about Wall Street, everything's about, well, the market's up. It's all about that. It's not about, I was watching just recently a David Attenborough documentary on Netflix, which was really interesting about how if we don't change now and don't do the right things in the world, well, humans could become extinct. And it's all about sustainability. And that really got my attention, Donna, because I'd love to get your views on, is the future enterprise all about social impact linked with sustainability?
It is about that. I never want to say, though, that business isn't in the business of making money.
Yeah.
Business leaders are not here to save the world. They're here to make good companies. The question then becomes, what is the company for? What is the role of the company in today's
Absolutely.
world?
What
So
is the purpose? Yeah.
the question becomes different now. What is it? What is a good company changes? It's no longer just a company that produces good quarterly returns for its shareholders, and thus impacts the stock market. All Trump is measuring American economic success by is the stock market. Well, that's the big tech companies mainly, which are making the shares go high.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the large corporations, the oil companies. These companies are not the American people. They're not American society. The stock market does not reflect that America has the greatest inequality of any developed country in the world. It doesn't reflect that tens of millions of Americans are living in poverty we normally associate with the third world. So if you just look at the stock market as your indicator of success, of the way you're running your country, you're blind.
Well, let's link that to page 46 of the Quantum Leader, where when you talk about strategy, for me, strategy is external. Whether it's the Quantum Self book or the Quantum Leader, the commonality I see here, and also Spiritual Capital when I read that, is you start with self. So if you could share with us a little bit more about, and here's the book, by the way, for those of you who want to grab it from Amazon, and details in the description area, but there's a beautiful model in there, which I really like, around layers of the self. Could you talk us through that? Why is that so important to go through these layers of self before you extend out externally to family members, leadership teams, management teams?
Because the leader is a person, the leader is a human being. And if the leader doesn't bring his entire humanity to the job, he's cheating his company, he's cheating his customers, he's cheating the community and the planet. So I think that leadership begins with the self, having integrity, having principles, having a higher purpose, wanting to serve something, wanting your company to serve something. That's why you're making money. Yes, you want to make money as a company. The companies are the wealth makers of society. That's what they're there for. But what is that wealth for? Who should it benefit? And therefore, what kind of person I am is the biggest question a leader needs to ask him or herself.
Yeah, and you talk about the paradigm. So I'm just going to quote this from your book. It says, our paradigm linked to shifting those paradigms with self. You said a most deeply held unconscious set of assumptions and values, the things we take for granted, that which determines our expectations, frames the questions we ask, and structures our approach to what we do. I had to read that 3 times. That's very deep, Donna. I mean, could you expand on that? What does that mean, and how do we really understand what that means to have that paradigm shift?
Well, I'm glad you summed up my definition, because that is the definition of paradigm. And this word paradigm has become, like so many other words, something people just throw around.
Yeah.
Every new idea is a new paradigm. Every new gimmick is a new paradigm. A paradigm is just what you said. It's the framework in which all of our thinking, all of our perceptions, all of our values are couched. So when I talk about a paradigm shift, I'm talking about a deep shift in the way we think about everything, the way we feel about everything, indeed the way we perceive everything.
Yeah, well, very, very powerful. And then when you start linking this with, you've got a section here, which again, I highlighted when I was reading your book, where you get into whole brain thinking, okay, using every aspect of who we are as a being, which I find very powerful, because a lot of people out there are busy, 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 or they're overthinking, but they're not really using their entire brain, are they? Because sometimes using your whole brain also means switching off or being silent for a while.
People tend to think thinking is thinking with your right brain, having specific thoughts that are focused on X, Y, or Z. And we're crowded with those thoughts today. As you say, people are too busy. They never sit down, take time to reflect and turn off. But when we turn off, we're not really turning off. We're giving the right brain and the whole brain a chance to do its work. We need to take time in our day to reflect on all that right brain thinking, to reflect on all that busyness, and say to ourselves at the end of the day, what did it all mean? What was I feeling during all that? What influence was I having on others while all that was going on?
Got it. Yeah.
If you don't catch up at the end of the day, you're not using your whole brain.
So when you talk about total intelligence, could you give us an example of what would be high level thinking? What would be low level thinking?
Well, all thinking is important, but total intelligence means integrating the various skills the brain has. So we don't want to stop being logical and rational. That has a very good purpose. But we want to bring to that logic and rationality the reflection and the quiet, the peace, the downtime, where the brain can give us deep intuitive insights about the meaning behind that thinking. That's when our creativity happens. If you're just busy, busy, busy all day, you're not being creative. You might as well replace yourself with a computer. And it'll do the job better than you will anyway, because it won't make mistakes.
Well, that's where it's going, isn't it, for most of the world?
We're more than computers, Reg. We have skills that no computer even conceived of could have. This business of reflective insight, when the new ideas simply pop into your head. Well, they happen when you're playing a game of golf, a game of tennis, sitting quietly during a meditation session, or just sitting in the evening listening to music that you like and letting yourself go. That's when all these intuitive insights that are your real creativity pop into your head.
So you recommend everyone should play more golf, more tennis, and meditate more?
They should do whatever it is that they find relaxing and takes their mind off things. Personally, I enjoy cooking for that reason. I like cooking all day because it takes my mind off, keeps my hands busy. But
What's your favorite dish then?
oh, I make Middle Eastern food.
Well, music to my ears.
Yeah, I love Lebanese food and Moroccan food and Turkish food and
Wonderful.
things that cook slowly in the oven, take a long time to prepare.
So let's go deeper into when you talk about slowing down and whatever makes you happy. You talk about the 8 principles of quantum thinking in this book, and there's one part of this chapter it talks about actuality versus potentiality. And I'll quote you here. It says, old paradigm science is concerned with the here and now, with things it can see and touch and measure. Its focus is on actuality. The new science has discovered that much that is interesting or valuable about physical systems lies hidden, is beyond our grasp, or is yet to unfold. I love that. Could you expand on that? How do we tap into more of this potentiality rather than actuality quantum thinking?
Well, that potentiality is the quantum dimension. Quantum physics tells us there's what David Bohm called the implicate order, the order that is implied but not yet spoken, not yet seen, not yet measurable. And all actuality has that implicate order, deep order of reality underneath it. And that's where the future comes from. That's where creativity comes from. That's where possibility comes from. And how we tap into it is what we were just talking about. You take your mind off the busyness of the day. You take your mind off about thinking about the actual, stand back and create a space inside yourself where the potential can speak to you.
Wow. Now, I know you spend, or prior to the pandemic, for many years, you're spending a lot of time in China as a professor, also working with very large corporations. And you talk about it in this book, not necessarily mentioning the Chinese, but I know you've worked with large blue chip Fortune 100 companies in the West. You've worked with big companies in the East. And you've got a whole section here where you talk about the difference between West and East thinking. And for example, West, conflict and control, East, cooperation. And the list goes on. You've got a long list here. Could you give us some examples of what you've experienced with Japanese and Chinese Far East corporations versus what's happening in the West?
Yes, I work particularly closely with Haier, China's global domestic appliances giant. And they have implemented all this quantum thinking as a new kind of business model. Because the Chinese naturally, because of their whole 3,000-year philosophical history, think in terms of the world having potentiality that has not yet been realized. The Chinese think naturally in terms of the long term. Things take time. You can't get results just like that. So the Chinese as a people are patient. The Chinese also see everything as connected to everything. Whereas we in the West have this paradigm that goes way back to the ancient Greeks, that the world is atomistic, broken up into separate units. And these units are isolated from each other. And in the West, again, going back to the Greeks, but it was all summarized in Newton's physics, we react to things. We don't creatively respond. We don't feel part of the world. We don't feel responsible for the world. The world happens and we react to it. And that's the way your typical Western business leader behaves. Oh, the market has changed. Let's quick jump. How do we react to that? The Eastern mind tends to be more part of the flow of events, the flow of unfolding history, the flow of unfolding possibility. So the Eastern mind tends to be more open and responsive. And I find that in the leadership of companies like Haier and Alibaba, China's two great companies.
Yeah, and again, and the list goes on here. So again, I recommend you read the book. You talk about West rule bound, East habit bound, West mechanical, East organic. But then you go on to talk about how both of them have weaknesses. And you got a really good case study with Volvo, with the old hierarchy model, and then the new learning model about there's the known way, then there's I don't know, let's try. And then using that whole intelligence, you get to a different way.
Exactly. And the Volvo leadership that put that plan into action in their engineering division said, we were terrified. We'd never jumped into the unknown before. Your typical Western company is risk averse, terrified of jumping into the unknown. People like to work with what they know. It's a Western way of thinking. Give me what I know. Let me know give me what I'm familiar with. I know where I am with that. Well, in our world today, look what's happened with COVID. Who saw that coming? One night we wake up and there's a new virus and the whole world has to shut down. Well, the only companies that I know of that succeeded in that were the big tech companies, because everyone started working online. And these Chinese companies like Haier that had changed their whole way of working to jump into the unknown with the way they're structured. Haier has 4,000 different micro enterprises making up the company. Every one of those is an experiment, a finger into the future. So when COVID happened, Haier didn't collapse. Haier didn't lose business. It grew. It made a profit because its micro enterprises were agile, able to act quickly, had their own supply lines, and could respond instantly with a new challenge. But our big Western companies are like dinosaurs. They're slow. They can't respond. So nearly every Western company, other than the tech companies, lost business, lost profits. Many collapsed during this COVID crisis.
Wow. And then you go into more depth with that, with, again, the quantum systems dynamics. I'll mention some of the headings: self-organizing, bounded instability. It seems like a lot of contradictions in some of these system dynamics when you look at it. I like this one. Could you expand on this one, number 6, evolutionary mutations?
Well, biologically, this is the way we progress. The body forms mutations, which are trial balloons. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. The bad ones die out. The good ones go on and make us different in some way that makes us better. You want to bring that same capacity to create mutations in your company, which is why this business that Volvo tried with its self-organizing teams and Haier does with its 4,000 micro enterprises, in a way, each self-organizing team or micro enterprise is a mutation, a trial. If one or two of them fails, big deal. You got 4,000 of them.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
ones that succeed will take the company forward.
Yeah,
So
and then
we want mutations. We want trial balloons. We need to take risk. We need to jump into the unknown.
and that links in with another one of the system dynamics where you talk about holistic. And I'll read this out. It says, these systems have no internal boundaries, no recognized separate parts. Each part is entangled with upon every other part. The parts are internally defined through their relationship to each other and to the environment. This is very, very powerful. You're talking about breaking all these silos. Yeah, the typical organizational structure.
Get rid of the silos. Get rid of the bureaucracy. It's strangling our companies. It's
So how do you
keeping people
entangle?
apart.
Yeah, so how do you create that holistic
You
structure
simply
and
go
system?
in there like Volvo did with their engineering team and like Haier has done with its micro enterprises. You get rid of the middle managers. You clear out the bureaucracy. You create a network of interactive self-organizing teams. You have these interacting, self-organizing teams creatively interacting with your customers and hire the customer as part of the company innovation. They have constant contact with their customers via their sophisticated IT system. A new customer need, it generates a new product. It's replaced mass production with mass customization. A brilliant breakthrough. I, the individual customer, can tell a quantum company, I don't like the product you've made the way you've made it. I want it to be like this. And within 48 hours, you've got it on my front doorstep.
Reading the book, we know we need to implement these things. It has to happen, but human beings, being human beings, there's many leaders out there. And when we deal with family businesses, we come across a lot of what we call emotional blockages. And in the latter part of the book, you talk about the motivations that drive us, that link in with a lot of the work we've done with family businesses, where you talk about higher vibrational motivation and lower vibrations. For example, high score would be enlightenment, world soul, higher service, mastery, and then lower areas would be fear, anger, guilt, and shame. So with all these principles that you share, it makes sense and we have to implement them, but human beings get in their own way, don't they, with these areas?
We do get in our own way. Psychological studies show that 84% of us are mainly driven by fear. Or anger or self-importance. 90% or 95% of our companies are riddled with fear. They're riddled with craving or greed, get the profits as quickly as we can, never mind the future, never mind the quality of what we're giving our customers, milk the market. The typical leader of a company is a bit like Donald Trump, I'm afraid. He's very self-important. He knows everything. He doesn't want to be questioned. He has all the answers. Well, with whom is he co-creating? With whom is he thinking and dialoguing and having new ideas if he doesn't want to be questioned? Quantum physics teaches us that it's when we ask questions, when we do experiments, that we bring that world of potentiality into reality. The leader has got to be open to being questioned, and companies have got to let go of the fear.
Yeah, and you've got some good questions around that higher or lower vibration in the book. I'll mention a couple of them. You've got specific steps there. So, for example, see where we are now, what motivations drive us as individuals or as a culture in the present. I think that's quite powerful because once you combine all the selves, you've got culture. And so there's a lot happening with each individual in the leadership team, isn't there? Which we have to work on.
Not just the leadership team, Reg, but with every individual in the company.
You're right.
The company culture is underrated in its importance. The company culture is like my personal psychology. It's the psychology of the company. If the company culture is riddled with fear or anger or greed, these negative motivations, then the whole company is acting with lower energy. It's going to be less productive. People who are afraid don't produce much. They're terrified. They're afraid the boss will criticize them. They're afraid they'll lose their jobs. They're afraid they'll be demoted. Nobody wants to take a chance on anything. You give them the freedom to be self-organizing and independent and tell them, go ahead, experiment. I want you to make mistakes because it's only when we make mistakes we learn something. You take away that fear. You turn them into children who are fearless in the way they play with their toys. Children are so naturally creative. But as we grow up in this fear-laden culture of ours, we become more and more afraid to be childlike, more and more afraid to experiment, to take risks, to just play with the situation.
Very powerful, very, very powerful. And this links in with your first book, Spiritual Capital, where you've got key areas in with your vast experience. You've had evidence of this, haven't you? Seen evidence. You talk about self-awareness, compassion. You're building businesses with this foundation and these principles. Ability to reframe. I like this one. What do you mean by ability to reframe if we want to transform?
It's to step back, look at something from a distance and say, what's really been going on here? What were my assumptions? Why did I think this was the right decision to make? And then possibly rejigging the entire picture. Because once you become self-aware and question, what were my motivations? What were my assumptions? Why did I think that was the best idea? You get new ideas. You think, oh, we could have done it this way, or we could have done it that way. Well, that assumption was based on false thinking. So reframing is changing your perspective on the situation and therefore the way you behave in the situation.
With the time that we've got left, and I know you've got another interview and webinar straight after this, you're a busy woman in this pandemic situation right now, all online. Towards the end of this great book, your last chapter is all about the quantum leader as a servant leader. Most people could look at the word servant and think negatively about that word. Could you talk us through why this could bring good fortune to leaders if they start thinking this way, to be a quantum leader as a servant leader?
Yes, people, business leaders particularly, when you say you should become a servant leader, they say, what, a servant? He's a lowly guy. He serves the important people. But the servant leader is someone motivated by a wish to do good, to be helpful, to make other people's lives more creative, other people's lives more valuable. And when those people are his own employees or his customers, he's making a better company. Mm-hmm. The leader who wants to serve is the leader who wants his company to give value. And when your company gives value, your company succeeds. It's the companies that don't give value because they're only thinking me, us, our shareholders, our bottom line. They don't give value and they fail. They're not sustainable. The servant leader wants to serve life. He wants to serve his employees. He wants to serve his shareholders, yes, but they're not the only ones he wants to serve. He wants to serve life itself.
And that's how you finish the book. You mentioned here, it's beautiful words, with the vision about the oath of the quantum leader, that becoming one of those business leaders who are servant leaders, leaders who serve not just stockholders, colleagues, employees, products, customers, but leaders who can also serve the community, the planet, humanity, the future, and life itself. Beautiful. So thank you so much. Words of wisdom. And it's not like you put this together in the last year with 9 books. You've spent an entire life in this area.
Yes.
And you've been a creator of the entire quantum thinking movement. You're the originator of this. What does the future look like? Then I'd like to get your view on the next 5, 10, 15 years with your work. Where's it going? Where do you see the future?
Well, I'm 76, so I hope I have another 10, 15 years.
Well, I think you've got a lot more than that. Come on, everyone's living well past 100 these days.
I'm finishing my 11th book right now, which is going to be my magnum opus on quantum management, which talks about the leader as a self, the leader as a member of society, the leader as the head of his or her company, etc. When I finish that, I then want to step back and learn more philosophy, do more deep thinking, and just bring more thought to these things and go deeper and deeper. So see myself as writing a series of articles and essays and blogs, and then maybe compiling them as books, but they will be giving myself toward the latter years of my life the chance to just go deep, because it's only when we go deep that we really understand what has to be done on this level.
Beautiful. Donna, the wisdom that you have today, with the experience and everything you have today, if you were talking to Donna 50 years ago, with the experience you have today, what would you be saying to her?
If I was talking to whom?
Yourself, but when you were 50 years earlier, with your wisdom today, when you were starting off your journey in this field, with the wisdom and experience you have today, what would you be saying to that Donna from 50 years ago?
My answer is probably going to disappoint you because you want me to say something, but in fact, I feel I've led a good life, an interesting life, a happy life. I love my work. I've been doing this work since I was 13, building atom smashers in my bedroom. I just want to continue and do more of it, and I don't want it ever to end. So
Well,
the me
it's a
of
good,
50 years ago was the me of today, really. Only
well,
I understand more now.
it's a great answer, because it shows everything you talk about in your books. You found your purpose at a very young age, and you've been pursuing that your entire life. Last question I've got for you before we wrap up is, based on our life experiences, we discover things that we don't know, and we discover things that we absolutely know, and we can bet on it. What are those things that you absolutely know? You could bet on it, based on your life journey.
Well, it's an open thing that I know that it's always good to keep an open mind, to learn more, to be humble and realize you always have more to learn, that we can never know everything, and that life is a journey of exploration, and that takes some risk. It means you do some experiments, but you see life as an open question, an open journey, an endless journey.
I said that was the last question, but I lied. You're working on your next few books. Your books will be a legacy in their own right. But how do we ensure that your message in your books and the great work that you've done continues? How do we train up more people in quantum leadership? I'd love to explore that with yourself and our firm. But do you have any other ideas? If someone's watching this, they want to reach out to you, if they want to know more, we'll make sure all the details in the description area. What are your thoughts around making sure your legacy continues?
I still myself do a few training programs, so I'm increasingly wanting to spend my time with bright young PhD students at universities. But I have developed a training program that I could show others how to use. They could bring it to their companies. I really think that every company is different. Every company, just like every human being, is unique. There's not one size fits all, but there is a general schema of working on raising your motivations, making your company culture more positively motivated, more open to taking risk and experimentation. There's a whole journey for the leader that I do still do executive coaching, and I'm happy to do that with anyone who might want to contact me. Because I think if the leader isn't on board, the company isn't going to change. You can't send middle managers to an exciting training program and expect them to go back and change the company. The CEO has got to be on board. The CEO has got to realize how important he or she and his or her personal transformation is if you want to transform the company.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. For those of you still watching to the end, make sure you go to Amazon or a local bookshop, grab a copy, check out Dana's other books as well, and don't forget to watch the other video on our channel for Spiritual Capital book that I also talked about in one of our previous episodes. And God bless you, Donna. Thank you very much for all the great work you're doing. Look forward to reading your next book as soon as you're ready with that, and look forward to doing this again in the near future. Thank you so much for your time.
I've enjoyed my time with you, Reg, and anytime.